It was the summer of 1998, and Daniel Carter and Melissa Carter, a young newlywed couple in their mid-20s, decided to spend a quiet Saturday afternoon together. They had only been married for 6 months, and were known by their friends as inseparable. Always laughing, always planning little adventures. On that particular day, Daniel suggested a simple picnic in the countryside, away from the noise of town. They packed a wicker basket filled with sandwiches, fruit, and Melissa's favorite peach tea, and set out in their green sedan, never knowing it would be the last time anyone saw them alive. They drove out past the farmlands of Creek County, Oklahoma, eventually pulling off a dirt road that wound its way into thick woodland. It was the kind of place most people avoided. Quiet, overgrown, with no phone signal and only the sound of cicadas and rustling leaves. The couple laid out their checkered picnic blanket beneath a large oak tree, snapping cheerful Polaroid photos of each other as they unpacked their meal. Neighbors who saw them driving earlier recalled Melissa leaning her head against Daniel's shoulder, smiling at the wind in her hair. Everything about that day seemed perfect, until it wasn't. When evening fell and the Carters didn't return, their families grew uneasy. Daniel's father called his phone repeatedly, but each call went straight to voicemail. Melissa's mother insisted that something was wrong. Her daughter was punctual, always checking in if she'd be late. At first, the family thought perhaps the young couple had lost track of time, but by nightfall, panic set in. Calls were made to local authorities, and by midnight, a deputy was dispatched to check the area where their car had last been seen. By dawn the next morning, searchers discovered the Carter's green sedan, parked just off the dirt road, keys still inside. The driver's door was closed, but there was no sign of the couple. The picnic blanket and basket were missing, along with the Polaroid camera they had carried. What struck investigators immediately was how ordinary and undisturbed everything looked. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken branches, no blood. It was as if Daniel and Melissa had stepped into the trees and simply never walked back out. Word spread quickly through the small town. Friends and neighbors volunteered in droves, combing through brush and calling out the couple's names. Helicopters circled overhead, and search dogs were brought in. Yet the trail ended abruptly a few yards from where the car had been parked. No footprints, no clothing, no personal items. Nothing. For many, it was as though the woods themselves had swallowed the young couple whole. And for the Carter's families, this was the terrifying beginning of a nightmare that would haunt them for the next 19 years. The morning after the disappearance, law enforcement mobilized quickly. Creek County Sheriff's Department set up a command post near where the couple's car had been found. Volunteers, deputies, and even state troopers joined in. Lines of searchers moved shoulder to shoulder through the dense woods, calling out the Carters' names, hoping to hear a faint response. Helicopters hovered overhead, scanning for movement among the trees. Despite the scale of the operation, not a single trace of Daniel or Melissa was uncovered. The woods gave nothing back. In the first 48 hours, the search intensified. Bloodhounds were brought in, trained to pick up the couple's scent from clothing retrieved at their home. At first, the dogs seemed to latch onto a trail leading away from the parked car. They pulled handlers deeper into the brush, weaving between trees and overgrown paths. But after only a few hundred yards, the dogs stopped abruptly, circling in confusion before sitting down. The scent simply vanished, leaving handlers and investigators baffled. Investigators expanded their reach. Nearby ponds and creeks were drained and searched, thinking the couple may have wandered into water. Old wells were checked, abandoned cabins were broken into, and hunters' shacks were combed for any sign of life. Searchers moved through ravines and thickets, marking off areas with bright tape, determined not to miss a single inch. Yet every area came up empty. The absence of evidence was unnerving. It was as if the woods themselves were mocking the searchers, swallowing up all clues and leaving nothing behind. As days turned into weeks, frustration and unease spread. Searchers began whispering among themselves about how strange it was. Usually, even in tragic cases, something turns up: a shoe, a torn piece of fabric, a trail of disturbed leaves. But with Daniel and Melissa, there was nothing. Not a footprint, not a dropped item, not even a sign that animals had disturbed their belongings. Locals began speculating that the couple had never left the area at all, but had been taken, quickly, quietly, and completely. By the third week, official efforts began to scale down. Deputies packed up the command post, though a small core of family and friends refused to stop searching. Flyers with the couple's faces were plastered across gas stations and grocery stores. Melissa's mother stood on the roadside daily, holding her daughter's photo, begging passing drivers for information. Yet no tips ever came, no sightings were reported. The woods remained silent, offering only an unsettling emptiness. For the Carter's families, the unanswered question was no longer just where are they? It was how could two people disappear without leaving a single trace? As the weeks passed and the official search dwindled, the disappearance of Daniel and Melissa Carter became more than just a missing persons case. It began to seep into the folklore of Creek County. Locals whispered about the woods as though they were alive, cursed, or hiding something no one dared to name. Children were warned not to wander too far from home, and hunters who once bragged about their trophies now avoided that part of the forest entirely. It wasn't just fear of getting lost anymore. It was fear of what might be waiting. Stories began to circulate about strange sounds in the trees at night. A pair of hunters claimed they heard what they swore were human screams, echoing across the valley around midnight. Another man, an older farmer, told deputies he saw a young woman darting across a clearing in a torn white dress. When he ran to help, she vanished into thin air. The sheriff's office dismissed these accounts as stress-induced hallucinations, but the stories only grew darker as time went on. Some of the older residents dredged up forgotten legends about the land itself. They spoke of the woods being bad ground, a place where people had gone missing long before the Carters. In hushed tones, they described a hermit who once lived deep in those trees, a man rumored to have hunted not animals, but people. Though he had died decades earlier, his presence was said to linger, watching anyone who dared to step inside his territory. Whether these tales had truth or not, they gave the Carters' disappearance a sinister, almost supernatural frame. Others believed the explanation was more human, but no less terrifying. Truck drivers passing through the area claimed to see strange lights in the woods, like flashlights moving in patterns, as though someone, or a group, was patrolling at night. A few whispered that the couple may have stumbled across something they weren't meant to see, an illegal camp, a hidden gathering, maybe even a cult. None of these theories were ever confirmed, but they added fuel to the mystery, making the story spread beyond the county and into neighboring towns. By the end of 1998, the Carters' disappearance was no longer just a local tragedy. It was a chilling campfire tale. Teenagers dared each other to spend a night near the dirt road where their car had been found. Parents tightened curfews, and hunters avoided certain trails entirely. The woods had become a place of dread, where reality and rumor blurred. And, while no one knew what truly happened to Daniel and Melissa, the stories ensured that their names were never forgotten, etched into the eerie folklore of the land itself. 19 years passed. The case of Daniel and Melissa Carter had long since slipped from the headlines, relegated to cold case files buried deep in the sheriff's archives. Their families had aged, their friends had moved on, and the world seemed to have forgotten. But in the quiet countryside of Creek County, the woods still stood, unchanged, overgrown, and heavy with silence. Locals who once spoke of the Carters in hushed tones had stopped altogether, as if mentioning their names might awaken something best left undisturbed. It seemed the mystery had finally faded into obscurity. In the summer of 2017, a rancher named Bill Hargrove was repairing fencing along the edge of his sprawling property. His land bordered the very woods where the Carters had vanished almost 2 decades earlier. Bill had lived in the area his whole life and had grown used to the uneasy stories people told. But he never put much stock in them. To him, the forest was just forest, dense, quiet, and at times lonely. On that particular day, he followed a section of broken, barbed wire into the trees, pushing deeper than he normally would. That's when he saw it. Through the thick brush stood an old, weather-beaten hunter's blind. The wooden structure was propped up awkwardly, its walls leaning with age, its surface gray and splintered from years of exposure. Bill was certain it hadn't been there when he was younger, though he had hunted these woods often. Something about it felt out of place, almost wrong, like it was hiding in plain sight. Curiosity gnawed at him, pulling him closer despite the quiet warning in the back of his mind. When he climbed inside, the air was heavy with the scent of rot and dust. Cobwebs clung to the corners, and the floor creaked under his boots. The blind was empty at first glance. Just scraps of decayed wood, an old rusted can, and layers of leaves blown in through broken slats. But as Bill's eyes adjusted to the dim light, he noticed one of the floorboards, sitting slightly out of line with the others. He crouched down, pried at it with his pocket knife, and felt it lift. Beneath that loose plank was a hollow space. Inside the hidden compartment was a bundle wrapped in filthy, tattered cloth. Bill's hands trembled as he pulled it out, unsure of what he was about to uncover. He expected old hunting gear, or perhaps nothing but debris. Instead, when he unwrapped the cloth, he froze. There, buried for nearly 2 decades, were 2 Polaroid photographs. One was a cheerful image of Daniel and Melissa, sitting on their picnic blanket, smiling at the camera. The second was darker, taken only moments later, but their expressions had changed completely. Both looked wide-eyed, terrified, staring past the lens at something unseen. Melissa's hand was raised as if to shield herself. Bill stumbled back, his heart pounding. He knew immediately these photos were not just lost mementos. They were evidence of something far more disturbing. Bill Hargrove stood frozen inside the hunter's blind, the 2 Polaroids trembling in his calloused hands. At first, he thought it had to be some kind of cruel joke. Old photos planted by teenagers, maybe even staged. But the faces staring back at him were unmistakable. He had seen them countless times, on missing posters that once papered gas stations and post offices in Creek County. Daniel and Melissa Carter. Their smiles in the first picture were bright, full of life. But the second image made Bill's stomach turn. Their eyes were wide with terror, and there was something about the sudden shift between the 2 photos that felt almost inhuman, as if fear had gripped them instantly and without warning. He examined the photographs closely. The first one showed nothing unusual. Just the couple on their blanket, food laid out, the woods stretching peacefully behind them. But the second told a different story. Melissa's hand was raised, fingers spread, as if trying to push something, or someone, away. Daniel's jaw was clenched, his eyes locked on something, just beyond the camera's frame. There was a blur in the corner of the picture, faint and almost unnoticeable at first, like a smudge. But the longer Bill stared, the more convinced he became that it wasn't a flaw in the photo at all. It was a shape. Bill's throat tightened as he realized what the shape resembled. It was tall, broader than a man, with the faint outline of what appeared to be a rifle resting against one shoulder. The figure was only half visible, as though caught by accident in the edge of the shot. The more Bill studied it, the colder he felt. Whoever, or whatever, had been there, the Carters had seen it too. And their expressions suggested they knew what was about to happen. As his heart pounded, Bill wrapped the photos back into the cloth and shoved them into his jacket pocket. His instincts screamed at him to leave the blind immediately, to get out of the woods before the weight of what he discovered became too much. But his curiosity, mixed with a creeping sense of dread, anchored him to the spot. Why were these photographs hidden here? Who had placed them beneath the floorboard, carefully concealed where no one would ever find them? And more importantly, why were they left behind at all? Bill finally stepped out of the blind, blinking against the sunlight as though he had just crawled out of a crypt. The woods, once familiar, now felt suffocating. Every shadow seemed alive, every rustle of leaves made him flinch. Clutching the Polaroids in his pocket, he made his way back toward his ranch with quick, uneven steps. He knew he couldn't keep what he had found a secret. Whatever had happened to Daniel and Melissa in 1998, these photographs were proof that they had not simply wandered off and disappeared. Something had been there with them. And that something had wanted the evidence hidden, buried deep inside a hunter's blind, waiting to be discovered 19 years later. When Bill Hargrove delivered the photographs to the Creek County Sheriff's Department, the reaction was immediate. Deputies who had worked the original case, now older, with gray hair and tired eyes, stared at the images in disbelief. The Carters' faces, once plastered on missing posters, were suddenly alive again, frozen in time within those Polaroid frames. It was as if the past had clawed its way back into the present. Detectives quickly contacted the state forensic lab, treating the photographs not as relics, but as critical evidence in what was suddenly a reopened case. The photos were carefully examined under magnification. Technicians confirmed they were genuine Polaroids from the late 1990s, not recent fabrications. The aging chemicals on the prints matched the era perfectly, and even the wear and discoloration on the edges suggested they had been kept in dark, enclosed conditions for years, like under the floorboard of a rotting hunter's blind. Nothing about them appeared staged. These weren't pranks. They were snapshots of a moment that had truly happened on that summer day in 1998. But what disturbed investigators most was what the photographs revealed upon closer inspection. In the second image, the one where Daniel and Melissa's expressions had shifted from joy to sheer terror, an almost imperceptible reflection appeared in the glossy film. It wasn't immediately obvious, but once enhanced, the outline became chillingly clear, a figure standing in the trees. The shape of the body was human, tall and broad, with what looked unmistakably like a hunting rifle angled against one shoulder. The reflection was faint, distorted, as though whoever held the camera had tried to avoid being captured. Yet the presence was undeniable. The forensic team studied the angle, light sources, and shadows in the picture, trying to determine whether it was a trick of exposure. But every analysis pointed toward the same conclusion. Someone else had been present during the Carters' picnic, watching, close enough to be caught on film, and the fact that the Carters themselves were staring in the same direction, faces twisted with fear, suggested they had seen their watcher before the shutter clicked. The question was not just who that person was, but why the photographs had been taken at all. As the images circulated among investigators, an unsettling theory emerged. The Carters had not simply vanished, they had been stalked, photographed, and then silenced. But why had the photos been hidden? And who had gone to the trouble of concealing them, in a hunter's blind for nearly 2 decades? Detectives shuddered at the implications. If the figure in the photograph was the perpetrator, it meant they had wanted the Carters' last moments recorded. It wasn't just evidence of a crime. It was a message. A message no one had been meant to find. The discovery of the photographs reignited the case, but it didn't bring the closure anyone hoped for. Investigators retraced every lead, digging back through files from 1998, re-interviewing old witnesses, and scouring the woods again with modern technology. Ground-penetrating radar was deployed, cadaver dogs were brought back, and drones scanned the forest canopy from above. Yet, just like before, nothing was found. No bodies, no belongings, no sign of the Carters. It was as though the photographs were the only proof they had ever been there at all. The hunter's blind was dismantled and examined piece by piece. Forensic teams collected wood samples, soil, even insect remains from the hollow beneath the floorboard. But no fingerprints, no DNA, no trace of who might have placed the photos there ever surfaced. Whoever had hidden them had been careful, meticulous even. It wasn't the work of chance, it was deliberate, calculated, almost ritualistic. The blind itself, weathered and decaying, was destroyed not long after, leaving behind only the unease of what had once been hidden inside it. Meanwhile, the photographs became infamous. True crime forums dissected every pixel, amateurs enhancing the images over and over, trying to make out more detail in the blurred figure behind the Carters. Some claimed to see a man's face. Others insisted it was a mask. A few swore it wasn't a person at all, but something larger. Something that didn't belong in human shape. No matter how much technology improved, the mystery refused to reveal itself, leaving more questions than answers. For the families of Daniel and Melissa, the photographs were both a curse and a reminder. They offered the first real glimpse of the couple's last moments, but they also cemented the horror of those final seconds. Their loved ones hadn't slipped away quietly or accidentally. They had been confronted by someone, or something, that filled them with unmistakable terror. Yet without bodies, without names, without confessions, there could be no true ending. The families were left in limbo, haunted by frozen smiles turned to screams. Even now, those who live near the woods speak of strange happenings. Campers report hearing voices at night, whispering just out of earshot. Hunters talk about the sensation of being watched, as if eyes follow them from the trees. And more than once, hikers have claimed to find Polaroid film cartridges lying in the dirt, weathered, empty, and abandoned, as though someone had been there, waiting to capture another picture. The Carters' case remains unsolved, the photographs locked away in an evidence vault, silent proof of a story that has no ending. And so, more than 2 decades later, the fate of Daniel and Melissa Carter remains one of the most chilling mysteries in Creek County's history. Their laughter, once captured in a Polaroid, was silenced in an instant, and all that remains are 2 haunting photographs, hidden away for 19 long years. Were they victims of a predator lurking in those woods? Did they stumble upon something they were never meant to see? Or is the truth buried somewhere deeper, waiting to be uncovered? What we do know is this: the Carters never came home, and the woods still keep their secrets. Perhaps one day the truth will surface. But until then, the photographs stand as a silent reminder of how quickly joy can turn to terror, and how some mysteries were never meant to be solved.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.